Please stand for the playing of the national anthem.
O land of beauty, our country where peace abounds, thy children stand free on the strength of will and love, with good in all our schools, Saint Kitts and Nevis. A nation bound together with a common destiny. As stalwarts we stand for justice and liberty, with wisdom and truth. We will serve and honor thee. No sword nor spear can conquer, for God will sure defend. His blessing shall forever to posterity extend.
Please remain standing for the invocation. Dear God and Heavenly Father, as we gather here today to commence what is a national discussion on an issue that is of national importance, we ask, dear God, that you guide the conversation, that you allow solutions to be presented in a way that is understandable to everyone who can appreciate the work that you have done to get us to this point through the leadership that you have put in place to get us to this point. And as we begin the proceedings, we ask for your mercies and your grace. In your name we pray. Amen. You may be seated. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I am Jamie Morris, Communications Officer in the Ministry of Public Infrastructure, and I have the honor of welcoming you to this very important national discussion on water and water management and water security. I begin by acknowledging the presence, of course, of the Minister of Public Infrastructure, Energy, Utilities, Domestic Transport, Information, Communications, and Technology and Post, the Honorable Conress Maynard, the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Public Infrastructure, Energy and Utilities, and Domestic Transport, Mr. Darrell Lloyd, the others at the head table, which include the water manager and engineer of the St. Kitts Water Services Department, Mr. Cromwell Williams. We also have, of course, the Mr. Jerry Moyes, Royal Utilities, the contractor, of course, of the Bastyr Desalination Plant, which, of course, will make for crux of our discussion today, basically. And also we have in our midst Livingston Pemberton, Abnima. Yes, I saw your face. Glad to have you here with us today. And we also have the Williams Brothers of Transglobal. Thank you for joining us. Ms. Pearl Williams of the St. Kitts Electricity Company, and any others whom I may have neglected to mention. Thank you for joining us here today. So, as I said before, it is my task to welcome you to this important town hall meeting on desalination and water security for St. Kitts. And on behalf of the ministry, I am indeed honored to open our meeting by thanking each of you for being here today. So we gather tonight at a pivotal moment in our nation's journey toward reliable, sustainable access to potable water. Under the leadership of the Honorable Conress Maynard, Minister of Public Infrastructure, the government of St. Kitts and Nevis has embarked on what is perhaps the most ambitious water sector reform in our history. As many of you are aware, the 2 million gallon per day desalination plant at the C.A. Paul Southwell Industrial Site in Bastyr is now well advanced. The plant was recently powered up for initial testing, marking a significant milestone. The facility is designed to provide a stable supply of water to Bastyr and the surrounding areas, helping restore consistent 24-hour service, which is a national priority. Across the island, complementary works, including the drilling of wells, pipeline upgrades, and broader infrastructural improvements are on the way to ensure water security for all communities. Tonight's town hall aims to provide clarity, transparency, and space for meaningful dialogue. We'll present updates, answer your questions, and discuss the road ahead as we strengthen the resilience of our water system. With that, I now invite the Honorable Minister, Conress Maynard, to share the latest developments and the government's vision for long-term water sustainability in St. Kitts. Thank you once again and welcome. Minister Maynard, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Jamie, for the introduction. I want to take this opportunity to say a pleasant good evening, good afternoon to those here in the hall, but also importantly, those who are on social media and listening on radio. I think it should be on ZIZ and Freedom FM. So we welcome your listening to this very critical discussion on water. Now, as many of us know, over the past decade or thereabouts, we have had increased challenges with the delivery of water to our homes and to our businesses. This stems from a number of reasons, but one including, for sure, the climatic changes that we have experienced. We are over that last decade or a little bit more, we have seen a near 20% decrease in the amount of rainfall we get every year. This year, for instance, underscores the unpredictability of our new climate reality, where we see increased levels of rainfall this year as opposed to other years, therefore making it very difficult to plan if we are to depend on rainfall. Many of us would have grown up knowing that we have what we call surface water from our sources such as Wingfield, such as Green Hill, such as Franklands, such as Stone Fort. And I had the privilege of visiting these sources. And the experts, the guys who go up there every week, etc., explained how the runoff has dwindled over the years, such that where we could not walk a few years ago, we can now perhaps have a picnic. Additionally, firstly, we get 30% of our water from the runoff sources or surface water. We get an additional 70% of our water from underground sources, or what we call groundwater. And that too has been adversely affected by climatic changes, namely, again, rainwater, because that is what provides the water for the underground source. But importantly also, the increase in sea level, even if it's just by a centimeter, will have a significant impact on our underground sources. Plus the demand that has been increasing over the years for this water source, with no new sources developed over the last couple of years, save and except, of course, the 300,000 gallon well that we found and developed in Keon. So we have a situation where our country is threatened for its ability to provide water. And I want to acknowledge the presence of the Prime Minister, Honorable Dr. Terence Drew, as he joins us here this afternoon, or this evening. And so what we have is a situation where we are unable to provide, given the traditional sources that we have of water, to meet the demands of our everyday. And we gave the commitment that in a modern day St. Kitts and Nevis, that we should not have a situation where we have to ration water. So with these challenges, and we will be able to get into them a bit more as we ask questions and we field questions from on social media and from those listening on the radio. We'll provide a WhatsApp number that you can reach out and provide your questions. Given these challenges, the Water Services Department had to give its advice as to where do we get additional sources from. In the Bastia Valley Aquifer, where we get about 2.5 million gallons of water per day, we are advised that we are pulling too much water from that aquifer, threatening its existence for generations to come if we do not pull back. And so in the Bastia area, it was determined that there are no real new sources of either surface water or groundwater that we can access. And so based on the analysis, the recommendation was that one renewable source we can turn to is that of desalination. And that is why the government has approved and facilitated the construction of what would be the largest desalination plant in the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis, comparable to some of the larger ones in the OECS, of a 2 million gallon per day desalination plant that is meant to address the water concerns and issues in the Bastia area. In addition to that, while we expect that the Bastia desalination plant, when fully on stream and all other interconnections are made, we have not left out the other areas of the country. For instance, from Sandy Point heading west to St. Paul's and Bay Parsons right around to Lodge and Keon. We have conducted a semi-airborne drone geological or hydrogeological survey identifying 17 potential sites of additional groundwater that we can tap into. We have prioritized 10 of them, which we will start with Sadler's in the coming weeks. And so this gives a general synopsis of where we are with the water services delivery in St. Kitts by identifying that we have to do the 2 million gallon per day desalination plant, in addition to drilling additional wells in the western and northern side of the island. We believe that these efforts will go towards returning St. Kitts to 24-hour water. And so with those remarks of the general outlook, I'll pass it back over to Chair, Mr. Jamie Morris.
For your words, Minister Maynard, I do also wish to acknowledge the presence of the Honorable Prime Minister, Dr. Terence Drew. I do have to remind the general public, of course, that you, at some point in this event, will be able to ask your questions. So the WhatsApp number to send your questions to is 664 3085. 664 3085. As we continue this very important discussion, I now invite our technical team from the Water Services Department to present details on the Desalination project, how it functions, and how it will enhance our national water system. We begin with the water manager and engineer, Mr. Cromwell Williams, and he will be assisted by plant supervisor, Francis Zelaya. Mr. Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Morris. Good evening to all. I wish to adopt the protocol that has been established. It gives me great pleasure, as always, to address the citizens, residents of St. Kitts and Nevis, particularly St. Kitts, when it comes to the management of our water system. I must say that I have had the privilege of entering into this sector, the water sector, way back in 1999, and it has been quite a journey. There's a lot of lessons that we have learned and we can learn as we continue in the management of our water sources. At the Water Services Department, we understand the challenges that we face as a country. And we understand the importance of engaging the general public as we move forward to address these challenges and to overcome these challenges. We don't pretend to have all of the answers, and so we are always open to suggestions and input from the public. I want to, in my brief opening remarks, I want to look at why currently there is a water shortage, and there are some communities that are inconvenienced. I will look at how we are addressing the situation, when we expect to see measurable and satisfactory improvement, and how much. Why the minister would have alluded to the fact that our water comes from rain. When I look up in the sky and I see the clouds, I see a manufacturing plant. Okay, if you like your drinks, your ting, your shandy, your beer, etc., you know where the source is. Okay, when you go across by, is that area called Buckley's, you see the factory and you know that is where they make those things. Well, in St. Kitts, our rain is manufactured in the clouds, in the sky, and it's not the same every time. And so when that rain falls, most of it in the mountains, because it rains more in the mountains than in the lower areas, basic geography. Most of that rain that falls in the mountain makes its way into the ground and becomes groundwater. Some of it, when it rains really heavy, when you get a heavy downpour, you would see some of it run in the guts. And persons always say, there we go again. Why don't these fools up at Water Department just capture this water? But we'll speak more about that. The point is that we have done the studies and we know for a fact that most of the water goes into the ground, much more than what you might see running in the gut at times. And so the rainfall is not the same every day, it's not the same every week, it's not the same every month or every year. It changes, it varies. However, we are able to manage because, as I said, most of it goes into the ground and it's actually stored in the ground. So when persons say, why don't you build more storage? The storage already exists naturally in the ground. Okay, what is stored in the ground is hundreds and thousands of times more than what we can build above the ground. So in St. Kitts, we are blessed. God has set us up. We have a natural reservoir of water that is in the ground. Millions and millions, matter of fact, billions of gallons of water in the ground. So, to be honest, why we have a water shortage? We have not been fast enough in getting that water out of the ground. In the Bastia area, you can say we have been, because we started drilling wells in the Bastia area way back in the 1970s to augment the surface supply. And by the time I joined the water service in 1999, we would have practically fully developed the maximum amount that we can get from that particular part of the island, which is the Bastia area. However, outside of Bastia, there's still a lot of water in the ground that we need to extract through wells. And so we are embarking on that. So how? Well drilling outside of Bastia, but as I said, in the Bastia area, because we already maxed out what we can get, we have to turn to the next viable solution, and that is desalination. I just want to mention quickly, when it comes to desalination, that it's nothing new. In around 2002, 2003, just after the Marriott was constructed, and you would see by the size of the Marriott, and at the same time they had redeveloped the golf course, they were asking for 1 million gallons of water per day. And at that time, we could not absorb that tremendous increase. After much back and forth, it was decided that the Marriott will build their own desalination plant. And that was done around 2003. That plant is still operating today, 20 plus years later, still operating, still supplying the Marriott. So how groundwater, wells, and desalination? Now, my predecessor, the manager before me, whom I met and worked with for a few years before he retired, one of the first things he said to me was, never let the water demand, that is the usage of the customers, never let that catch up with what you have available to supply. Never let that catch up. And we tried our best, but that happened, unfortunately. And the reason he said was because, you know, those guys up at electricity department, that time it wasn't Skelec yet. He said those guys up at electricity department, when the electricity demand increase, all them guys have to do is buy a generator and bring it in. With us here in water, we don't have that luxury. We can't buy a water generator and bring it in. Well, that was 1999, but in 2025 we can. We can buy a water generator and bring it in, which is a desalination plant. However, it takes time. And so we started the construction of the Bastia desalination plant just over a year ago, and we are just practically completed. It took a little longer than we thought, but it still takes time. So whether you're building a desalination plant or you're drilling wells, it takes time. However, we are saying to the public, water users throughout St. Kitts, that we are making progress every day. every week, and it is just a matter of a few more weeks in the case of Bastia. Maybe I should say a few more days, a few more months in the case of the well drilling around the rest of the island before we have the entire island return to 24-hour supply. How much? Now, we want the public, we want you, the water users, to understand that we have a culture in St. Kitts. We have a culture. I'm not talking about the masquerade and the bull. We have a culture in St. Kitts when it comes to water. People will tell you that, oh, we have a lot of water. You all just don't know how to manage it. And because of that perception, misconception, people have a culture of wastage, feeling we can use water anyhow because there's a lot of water. It rains every day, some will say. Well, that is being foolhardy, if I might say. With all the development that have happened over the past decades, what obtained in the 1970s and 80s and 90s does not obtain in 2025. You might have the same amount of rain. Actually, we have less. But even if you had the same amount of rain and the same amount of water, you have a lot more demand. You have demand from industries. You have demand from tourism. You have demand from all other sectors. And so we want you, the consumers, to understand that we cannot be business as usual when it comes to the business part of providing water. It costs $50 million plus to provide this desalination plant that we have constructed for Bastia. That is money that could have gone in a lot of other sectors in developing our country. Not only did it cost $50 million to construct, it's going to cost millions of dollars to operate it every year. That is money that could have gone again to various other sectors. So we have to understand that we have a responsibility to make our contribution, pay our water bills, and conserve and use less water. So, in summary, we are working to bring St. Kitts into where we ought to be in terms of having a reliable and safe water supply. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Extended as well to our viewers and our listeners. Thank you for having me today. My name is Francis Zelaya, and I am your desalination plant supervisor. I want to touch base today a bit on how desalination works, as well as the operation and maintenance. So let's dive right into it. What is desalination? Desalination is the process of separating salt from seawater. We want to make this water potable, so it has to go through a series of filtration. So at our Basseterre desalination plant, we have several different sets of filtration. The first one being out into the sea. We have our intake lines, 1,000 feet out into the sea. At the end of those intake lines, we have our first filters. These filters out particles that may enter the water line. This can be small fishes, it can be large fishes, it can be sargassum, it can be a number of different things. So this is the first filtration method of desalination. The water then gets taken into the plant via our intake pumps. We have 6 of them at the plant. The pump is assisted by what we call a vacuum pump. This basically primes the line so that the intake pumps does not strain while sucking up the water and sending it to the various stages of desalination. After the intake pumps has done its job, the water then goes on to what we call the media filtration building. The media filtration building has 20 different filters. These filters can filter 15 to 20 microns of particles out of the water. You will notice as we go on in the process of desalination, when we move from filter to filters, it's going to be filtering out the largest particles. The next step of the filtration, we're going to filter out smaller particles and smaller particles as we go along. So the first large set of filters in the plant is the media filters. These can filter up to 15 to 20 microns. The water then goes on to the main building, the reverse osmosis building. In this building now, we have several different other filters. The first filter that is there is what we call the cartridge filters. These filters filter out the smaller particles that the media filters were not able to filter out the water. The water then moves to a second stage of the cartridge filter. These filters are placed just before the high pressure pumps. These filters filter out what the first stage of the cartridge filters was not able to filter out. So it goes down smaller and smaller. We come to the main stage of desalination now. This is what we call a reverse osmosis. And this is the main part of desalination. This is where the salt is separated from out of the water. These filters can filter down to 0.001 micron. We're talking about cellular level. If you think about osmosis and your science class in school, you would know that salt water tends to move freely from low concentration to high concentration. This moves freely in nature. Now, when you talk about reverse osmosis, this does not occur freely in nature. We have to do an extra step so that we can send or filter out the salt out of the water. How do we do this? We do this by the aid of our high pressure pumps. The high pressure pump works along with what we call energy recovery device to boost the water pressure so that we can force it through these semi-permeable membrane, or in other case, or filters, RO filters. Once the water passes through these filters, it separates salt from out of the water. But not only that, it goes even further. We separate out all the minerals that is in the water, as well as viruses and bacteria. So if you think that the water you're getting from a desalination plant is not good enough, I invite you to come out and see exactly how the process of desalination works. So let me go on and say that we have a second stage or a second pass of this permeate water. So instead of only going through the RO filters one time, we have a second stage that is on the top of the RO filters. And so the water then goes through this same reverse osmosis filter for a second time. So it sends the water to be cleaned even further. Most plants around the Caribbean does not have the second stage or the second phase. And so if the water quality we would be getting from this plant would be way better than most of these plants out there. The water then goes to what we call the post-treatment phase. This includes the addition of minerals back into the water. Why do we do this? Well,
I would have mentioned that the RO filters separate everything out of the water. So if you would taste the water as it comes out these filters, the water would taste extremely flat. You would say, oh, this water don't taste nice. So this is the main reason why we will have to add minerals back into the water. One form of mineral that we added back into the water would be calcium carbonate, right? This would be part of our post-treatment process. Other post-treatment process would include the dosing of pH balances. So if our pH is too high, we would increase the dose to bring it down to a neutral level. If it's too low, then we make adjustments as well. We also add substance in the water to deal with corrosion. So we have corrosion inhibitor. We also have to disinfect the water, so we add some chlorine in there as well. The water then goes to what we call a storage tank there at the Basseterre plant. The tank can hold 500,000 gallons of water. We would test this water every day. Actually, once the plant is running, we're gonna test every hour. We want to maintain the quality of the water. If the quality is bad, we would not be sending this water out to the public. So not only testing the water hourly, but we have to test our dosing measurements. And so we're gonna be testing the water to say whether we are sticking within the range or not given by the World Health Organization. The amount of dosing for the post-treatment stuff that we're using is, being maintained. So if all said and done, all the parameters meets the range, then the water then goes to Morn Peak and gets distributed to the public. I want to touch base a little bit on maintenance and preventative measures. First off, we have so far 2 of our assistant operators that are already specialized in reverse osmosis. They have started with us from the beginning of this year and is still going strong with us, namely Mr. Abbott and Mr. Joe Hashin. So these guys are specialized in reverse osmosis since they have been with us, and they are currently going on. We want them to go further than what they have already acquired now. However, it is a good mention to note. When it comes to the quality of the water, I would have mentioned that we would be testing the water every hour of each day to make sure we're sticking with the pH level, the chlorine level, all the parameter ranges given by World Health Standards for drinking water. This is in-house testing. Now, to further test the water, a third party would come in. We would ask the Bureau of Standards to come in and do their test to make sure we are actually maintaining what we say that we are maintaining, right? So you guys won't take our word for it. The Bureau of Standards will come in and verify that we are actually doing what we say we are doing. So the Bureau of Standards will be taking the test. We are going to be doing our in-house tests that I want to go on to mention about daily operations. We have to calibrate our equipment. We have to do checks. I would have mentioned our specialists that we have already. These guys need to pay keen attention to all the numbers displayed on all instruments in the plant. This is a key part of daily operations and maintenance. Why do we need to look at these numbers every day? Well, the numbers tell us a lot. This tells us the health of the plant. This tells us what we need, what changes needs to be made then and there. So if you're looking at, for example, a meter reading the conductivity of the water, if it's too high, we have to make adjustments. The number if the number is too high and we don't make adjustment, then we may have bad quality water at the end of the day or at the product. And so this is just one example of what we look at when it comes to daily operation and maintenance. I want to go on to mention about other parts of maintenance, preventative maintenance. This include making sure our dosage is not too high. We want to use our consumables, however, we want to use it sparingly, meaning we don't want to just be using it and not keeping track. We want to make sure that, we're using it's working, the plant is working efficiently as possible with all the consumables that we have. And that would require us to do inventory. That would require us to make sure that all our stuff are calibrated. That would allow us to do various checks throughout the day seamlessly with no issues occurring. So when it comes to desalination plant and the quality of the water you're getting out there, and you feel that you have any doubts, please call water department, ask for Francis. Francis will say, "No, come to the plant. Let's have a tour. Let's get whatever is on your chest out there and see what, after explaining and going through the plant, what your feelings are after." Because I can tell you for a fact the water from desalination would be the best out there. Thank you.
Again, I want to, and that's fine. I know that you're very eager to speak, Jerry, and you have a lot to say, so that's quite in order. I do want to give the number again out to the general public who are listening. If you have a question and you want it to be asked, please WhatsApp your question to 664-3085. That's 664-3085. So at this moment in time, I would like to give Mr. Jerry Moyes of Royal Utilities the opportunity to make some remarks about the Bastard Desalination Plant. Mr. Moyes.
Jamie, thank you for the introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, I appreciate being here today. And it's been a long year. It's been a good year. But where do I come from? Well, I'm Jerry from Royal Utilities, where I've run the desalination plant for Royal Utilities in Frigate Bay over by the Marriott. I also run the power plant at the Marriott. So I've got a good crew of people. We've worked very closely together since 2002. And before that, I worked at Jactar as chief engineer for several years. And but switching over to the Marriott side of things, I've still got 90% of my original staff. We work very well together. And the one thing I've come to learn is I've got a lot of respect for the people that I work with. The people that I work with, they're warm and friendly people. They're quick to laugh and have fun. We do our work, but we also socialize, and we do enjoy our day. Good, warm, friendly people. Now, I know that out in the world these days, there's a lot of things going on that are extremely unpleasant. I think the world could learn a lot from the people in St. Kitts. Life here is calm and cool. There's a lot of things happening out in the world that simply aren't. So I have the greatest respect for the people here that I work with here in St. Kitts, at Royal Utilities and St. Kitts Sewer and Water, over in Frigate Bay by the Marriott. But it's such a pleasure to work with focused and brilliant people right here in St. Kitts. People like the minister beside me. This minister has championed the project. He took it on when many others before him realized the absolute necessity of the shortage of water, but failed to take action. He chose the hard route and didn't back down. And now we have this state-of-the-art desalination plant right here in St. Kitts, ready to go. The plant is a work of art, a technological marvel, complete with 5 production lines. So how do we desalt water? Well, we pull in 4 million gallons of seawater per day. From that, we extract 2 million gallons of fresh water. The remaining water goes right back out into the ocean, untouched, all natural. We don't add anything to it. Just like evaporation, we take the water in, extract fresh water for the people, making sure that that water is treated with this, that, and the other thing to make sure that it meets all the standards of the World Health Organization. And the remaining water goes right back out into the ocean where it started its journey. And down this path, the Marriott has been doing this since 2002, 2003. I was there at inception. I helped during the construction of that plant. And I've run the plant since those days, a few decades ago. And nobody at the Marriott has ever complained about the abundance of water. We do chlorinate it, we do treat it, and we have third-party testing every single month. The Bureau of Standards comes out, unannounced. They take their water samples, and they test the water. We've never had an issue. I know desalination plants, worked there, like I said, 2 decades. And it's kind of fun. It's a challenge. It's a lot of work. But it's a fun challenge because everybody benefits from it. The lights go out, people kind of notice. No water coming out of the faucet, people notice. Sometimes people don't mind making noise. So we have a devotion to those that rely on us, honor and integrity, to meet the demands of the 2 factories that we run that produce the power and the water. And we've carried that commitment over to this desal plant that we've just finished building. This state-of-the-art desalination plant is comprised of several computerized systems. Each production line has its own industrial computer for seeing into the heart and soul of each of the machines. As Mr. Zelaya has mentioned, they take readings hourly, daily, different readings all the time to ensure that water is spot on. Well, to do that, the industrial computers, they see inside with their pressure gauges, sensors, flow meters, delta this and that. They monitor every aspect of every stage of water production. And then all of these industrial computers from each of the production lines, they feed into a main plant controller. And this main plant controller computer will interface with the plant operator's phones. So if there's ever a problem, night or day, weekend or holiday, the gentleman at the end of the table, Mr. Zelaya, will get a notification on his phone. He drops what he's doing and he heads straight over. That is the life of a desalination supervisor. You do whatever it takes every time. Production matters, excuses don't. So it's a challenging job, but it's also a very rewarding job. So at all of this site, this plant, is built on a rock-solid foundation designed by professional engineers, inspected and signed off by the good people at the planning board. So at this point, I want to say very big thanks to Jay, Dwight, and Glenna for monitoring every step of the progress, for keeping an eye on everything, helping us out, inspecting everything, making sure it's done by the book, every step, then stamping, and off we go. And concrete flowed. I want to just touch on concrete for a moment. So we brought our concrete in from St. Kitts Masonry, and we didn't get the regular residential grade concrete. We used the top shelf, 5,000 PSI concrete. But what's more important, or what's more significant, is that one of our pours was 27 truckloads of cement. One pour. And all of this being at 5,000 PSI concrete. So again, my hat's off to those lads over there who put it all together and made all those truckloads and truckloads of cement uninterrupted. So it's nice when you can rely on the different trades that we interface with and we rely on to ensure the proper construction and the oversight of the construction by the water department manager, but also the Williams brothers from Trans Global, keeping an eye on every step, every stage, everything that we've done. This whole plant, there's over 500,000 components required for the construction and operation of this plant, and enough wire to go around St. Kitts. There's that much, not only the high voltage wire, the industrial voltage wire, communication wire, go around the entire island of St. Kitts with how much wire is in that plant. So I am so proud of this accomplishment, to be a part of the Prime Minister's dream and the ministers spearheading this project. I am humbled to be a part of this government's vision that the great people have made happen here in this island of St. Kitts. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Jerry. It is now time for our Q&A segment, the most important part of tonight's event, where you as members of the general public and stakeholders get to ask our panel the questions that you need to. There is a microphone in the center of the room, so if you have a question, I would invite you to step up to the podium and kindly limit yourself to no more than 2 questions at a time, please.
Good evening. Ben Bad. I remember several months ago, SK Newsline had the opportunity to have a tour of the facilities. I think that was around June or July, with Mr. Moy and also with you, Mr. Williams. And I must say that we were very impressed with what was going on there. Now that it's almost finished, maybe we can come back and report to the people exactly what we see and how it works and that kind of thing in a visual kind of way. One thing though, I just want to clarify something that was said with regards to the testing. We talked about the Bureau of Standards coming in at periodic periods and also testing on an hourly basis. My question is, between the last filtration, the reverse osmosis, and the water going into the storage tank, what could go wrong between them? I am assuming that the water coming out of the reverse osmosis process would be at the ideal standard, so to speak. So what happens that will require hourly testing thereafter with the water in the tank?
Thank you for that question. So after yes, so after the water goes through the reverse osmosis process, what comes after is the post-treatment, where we remineralize back the water as well as disinfect the water and, add in the corrosion inhibitors and stuff like that. And so if we do not test the final product, the water stored in the storage tank, how would we know the ranges of these or the level of these stuff that we're adding back into the water? Remember, I would have mentioned we're trying to stick within the parameter ranges of the World Health Organization standard. And this is why we would need to test the water every hour, daily. Does that answer your question, sir? All right, thank you.
I respectfully acknowledge the protocol established. I am a resident of East Pasture, more particular, Ponce Pasture, Congress, Mr. Honorable Congress. I see that the theme here said national discussion on water. I would like to ask you, why didn't you come to the resident of East Pasture and get their feedback? I think the water engineer said you do not have all the answers. So I'm asking you why you didn't come to the resident. The reason why I'm saying that is I'm 55 years old, so I grew up in that area. I know it very well. And for 100 years, the SSMC toxic waste flowed nonstop from 1912 to 2015 when it went into liquidation. And I'm asking why that particular location where you have massive ships comes in practically every day and the pollutants, more so, I learned today that the hose or the pipe goes out 1,000 feet out. That means reaching up by the deep water harbor. So all that pollutants, why put it there? We know we need the desalination plant. That's a fact. Water is scarce. Why didn't you put it like the Marriott? Put it over on the Atlantic side where the Marriott have theirs. And my suggestion, I think that water that's on the paper should not be turned on. It should not be turned on for the people of East Pasture. I do not think that is safe, and that I speak gallons, not million, probably thousands of gallons of water. Still wastewater flows from Elmons, from Bird Rock and the surrounding area. Not to go back into history with all those industrial plants, the wastewater will go there and buried in the seabed. Yeah, that's all I have.
All right. Thank you very much for the question. And that is why we have these forums, so that persons can ask their questions. So firstly, let's deal with the first suggestion of going on the Atlantic side. I'll probably ask Jerry to address this. But there are a lot of reasons why the Caribbean side is much more favorable to desalt water. I'll let Jerry get into the challenges that they have on the Atlantic side, which would pose significant barriers for the production of salt water. With respect to the question of what maintains in the water at the location, there was an EIA done, and there were no signs, as far as I know, of any problems with the water in that area. Additionally, we are talking about sea water here. But before I go into the seawater point, let me just give an example. In one of the most water sustainable places in the world, Israel, they use water that is coming from everywhere. Sewage water, water running in systems, and so on. The most filthy water that you could possibly think of. And they use technology to remove all of that to ensure that you get clean, pristine water. The challenge here is not what it starts with, but what you end with. And that is why these test parameters are so good. In fact, I would challenge you that if you test the water that comes from our natural springs, from our groundwater, and you get two bales, you don't know which is which, and you go and test them in any parameter, any lab around the world, I will almost guarantee that the desalinated water will be of much higher quality than the spring water. I know you're shaking your head, and I respect your belief. But what I would advise is that we use our science to test this. You may have a point, but unfortunately, I will not be able to go on what somebody feels. I need some science to back this up. So therefore, I will let Jerry have a conversation about why this location is actually a very ideal location for desalination. I'll give a few. One of the challenges, we do have a desal plant on the Atlantic side as well at Keys. And Mr. Zelaya will tell you that the water that we're taking there, for a number of reasons, how much turbulence there is in the water, the level of sargassum in the water, it adds a lot of additional barriers to getting clean water. So you have to do a bit more to clean it. Jerry would tell you how much times they have to actually go and clean the intake and how difficult it is to keep their intake free to get in the water. On the Caribbean side, what we have is a situation where we have very little sargassum. In fact, when I was speaking with the engineers, they were mentioning that this was some of the cleanest seawater that they have experienced in order to desalinate. And so while I welcome persons' concerns, it is not sufficient for me to go on that I have this concern. I invite you, if there is an expert that you can rely on, if there is a test that you can show, we invite you as well to take the finished product of the water and test it. This plant actually is so pristine that the water that is coming out is very close to, well, it is pure H2O. So it gets rid of even the bacteria that exist in the water. Now, the scientists would tell you why it is important sometimes to have certain minerals and so on remain in the water in order for it not to be, in order for it to be palatable for us. And so I would invite you, I understand, I appreciate your feelings, etc. But we would need something, and we are very open to finding it. We have not found it. And if you can point us to that, then I would welcome that. I'll ask Jerry to just deal with why this site is a very good site.
Minister, thank you very much for that. Yes, working the Frigate Bay desalination plant has posed significant challenges over the years. The Atlantic, since around 2014, has seen the proliferation of Sargasso seaweed. And we all heard about it, we've all seen it on the different shorelines. But with our seawater intake filter array out in the ocean, the amount of work required to keep that plant running is horrific. It's 100-fold more than it was when we built it in 2004. We have to send the divers out there during the summer season, pretty much weekly, to go out there and clean off the filters so we can keep on making water. And Sargasso is only going to be getting more and more intense and more problematic. But not only the Sargasso seaweed, and trust me, it's a huge problem, but the turbidity of the water in the Atlantic, from thousands of miles of being churned up by the winds and the waves, is significantly different from the water on the Caribbean side. On the Caribbean side, there's less salinity, which means the energy required to remove the salt from the water is significantly less. And what I've seen from the operation of the desal plant when we were doing the run-in and the testing is the new plant draws about 33% less electricity than the Marriott desalination plant. And that's enormous, that's huge, because the less electricity required to run the plant, the less diesel you have to burn at the power station to make the electricity to send to the desal plant to make the water. The water there is clean and pristine. We had it analyzed several times during the environmental impact assessment study prior to the selecting the final location. And what we found is, since we started running in the plant at various stages, we've had 5 or 6 microbiological tests done on the water, because certain things are extremely important, and following the standards set out in accordance with the World Health Organization is absolutely crucial. So that's why we've done a significant number of random tests on the microbiological side to ensure there's absolute zero chance of anything happening in that water. And it's all done by chain of custody. So we call the Bureau of Standards. They come down, they take the water sample. They tell us when they're coming. They test it from our finished water cistern. They take the sample back to their lab. They do the testing. All we have to do is make the phone call and pay the bill. They take the water samples, they give us the test results, which we share with the minister and the water department. Everything is open book. Everything is right there for everybody to see. And that is crucial. If you're going to develop the confidence of the people in desalination, then you must be 100% open book. Everybody has to see the results. But I'm talking only on the microbiological side. Water testing also has a water chemistry side. And the chemistry of the water on the Caribbean side, for some reason, is better than on the Atlantic side. Quite possibly because of the long wind waves, turbidity, higher salinity. I don't have all of the answers. I just know that when I see the water chemistry results of not only the water coming into the plant, but the water leaving the plant, the water quality coming out of this new plant is significantly better than the Marriott water. Now keep in mind, we've never had one complaint in 20 some odd years from the Marriott water. And nobody has ever complained about the water. We've always been able to make the water, despite the tough conditions of being on the Atlantic. This new plant has the immense benefit of being on the Caribbean side. And what's really nice is Skellig ran a designated power line all the way from their Nismas plant straight into this plant. The water department ran a dedicated line from this plant all the way up to Morn Peak. Everything that we do, everything that we've done, third party tested, third party reviewed. And the more we're open book, the more everybody has a feeling of comfort and acknowledgement. And we welcome testing. We stand behind our product 100%. I believe in it. It's been used worldwide for over 50 years. It's nice to see that St. Kitts has gone this route because we know we can trust the water. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Yes, I just wanted to add just a bit on top of what Mr. Morris would have mentioned. We even went further when it comes to testing the water. We would have reached out to Bureau of Standards. Bureau of Standards would have collected some samples and sent it overseas for testing. And I believe any day now we would be receiving back these results. As we receive these results, we can make it known the quality of what the results yield. And I'm very sure that what would be coming back is going to tell us the water is very safe for consumption. Thank you.
Good afternoon or good evening. My name is Jeremy Mike. I am a chemist by trade, and I also work at the Bureau of Standards, but I am not here asking a question as a representative of the Bureau of Standards. My question, we've been speaking of quality and so forth, and if you're speaking of the quality, I wanted to ask if you have a quality management system in place. And the reason why I'm asking there's a quality management system in place is that the quality management system will take into account the conformity assessment aspect of the water, which would be the testing of on the microbiology and the chemistry aspect of the water. It will take into account the documentation and the processes that you have to do. It will also take care of the metrological aspect, which has to do with the calibration and whatnot of the water, right? It will also take into account any corrective actions, documented corrective actions that you would have to make in case there are anything that is done. So I know we are saying that, you know, and I'm proud of the project as well. So don't take this as something that I'm putting it down or anything like that. But if we're going to speak and say, okay, the quality of the water is good and so forth, how do you prove it? How do you prove it? One of the ways is to have a quality management system in place. And not only that, it could be a certified quality management system. For example, ISO 9001 is such a system, and actually it's called quality management system, right? So that this, as we speak on the transparency aspect, this allows you to be audited and so forth to make sure that everything has been put in place, and to have somewhat of a quality management system, and if we put it further, to have a certified quality management system. This speaks to the public and say that you know what you're doing, you're competent in what you're doing, there is some checks and balances in place and whatnot. So that is my question. If you have one in place, what is it called? Thank you.
Thank you for that, sir. Let me start off by giving a brief history of my background. I am from Belize. I have an associate's degree in marine biology. I have a bachelor's degree in biology with core courses including microbiology, chemistry, limnology, which is the study of body of water inland, and a number of other classes. I have experience in water chemistry from the water company back home, where I tested chemical, physical, microbiological tests. These were done on groundwater, surface water, wastewater, as well as treated water. I have experience in desalination outside of Belize and outside of St. Kitts. I would have run the plant as well as oversee the lab. Now, to your question, do we have this in place? I can't say we have it as yet. Why I can't say that is because we're still seeking manpower. And so if you would have listened to us the other day on the radio station, the minister would have, asked persons to come out, come join water department, come and, see what it's all about, because we do need the extra manpower. Without the manpower, we can't get much done. I do understand where you're coming from and the need to have these systems in place. It will definitely be in place. However, as long as we have the manpower to put these systems in place, you will definitely see results. You can come in and ask anytime, what is the quality of these parameters today? You'll be able to see them. Or if you want to see them from yesterday, the day before, last year, I personally like the convenience of logging down data, because data tells us the trend, the life of the plant, the health of the plant. And so looking back at these data can definitely assist us moving forward, regardless if it's quality. We have so many different pumps at the plant. We need to make sure our pumps are running efficiently as possible. We have our VFDs in place, variable frequency devices. Yes, we can use them to adjust the voltage and the speed of the pumps, but maintenance is a big role in managing a plant. So from quality to pumps life or health to the entire plant health, we definitely need to manage it properly. Thank you.
Yes, so I just wanted to add to that, of course, that acknowledging that we are building the capacity locally, we have engaged the manufacturers of the plant for a 12-month period for the operation and management of the plant. So they're bringing all of their expertise to train our people to be able to ensure that we have quality management, operations management, maintenance management, etc. So we have not taken anything for granted at all. We are aware that this is our first foray into desalination, but the government has gone the extra step to ensure that we have engaged the actual manufacturers of the plant to provide this service for at least 12 months in the first instance. We will then do an evaluation of our capacity and what we have been able to transfer to our staff before we make the decision to operate it ourselves. So I just want to alleviate any concerns that anyone would have that the different systems would not be in place. We have gone ahead, of course, and hired, as Zelaya mentioned, he is from Belize. Many, many moons ago, we would have advertised extensively for these positions. And so we had Mr. Zelaya winning out for this particular position. And he won out clearly, as you see, because of his extensive background in desalination, but also in marine biology, in chemistry, and all the other things that he laid out. So he brings that level of expertise and comfort that we have someone on staff who could actually translate the information that is there. In terms of verifying the information, the plant records all of these things, displays the information instantaneously. The test that run the plant, and I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that apart from the manual monitoring of this, the plant is able to detect if there is something catastrophic and needs to close down. So I have every confidence in the processes that we have outlined, and we have taken everything into consideration to make sure that this plant runs effectively. Added to that, of course, we do have a success story on the island. We have a desalination plant that has been run by this gentleman, Mr. Jerry Moyes, for the past 22 or 23 years. A hotel where if there is a single issue with the water, it could not only bring disrepute to that hotel, but also to the country of St. Kitts. I need some wood to knock on. We have not had that occasion as yet. And that is one reason why I particularly feel comfortable and confident in the leadership of Royal Utilities. And they have given their unwavering commitment, not just to build the plant, but to stay along with it and to be a partner in our journey as we transition to desalinated water. So that is a very valid question. All of those different practices will be put in place. We just had a meeting today, water services, in terms of when their experts will be landing on the ground. They do have experts on the ground now, but the ones who are going to be here permanently for that 12-month period, we're finalizing when they will be on the ground. So we're using every opportunity. We're sparing no expense to ensure that we have the highest quality water coming from our Bastard desalination plant.
I just wanted to add, not as Prime Minister, but as Minister of Health, and I don't know if the Minister is aware or you're aware, but we engaged the World Health Organization through PAHO over a year ago to ask them to come into the country to build capacity in the Ministry of Health in terms of water testing quality. So the Ministry of Health, about 2 days ago, has been certified by PAHO with all the World Health Organization standards, methodologies, and so forth to test water quality in St. Kitts and Nevis. And so the Ministry of Health will be doing its own surveillance and testing independent of what you're doing to the standard of the World Health Organization, monitored by PAHO, which is the regional branch of the World Health Organization, to make sure that our water is at the international standard or the World Health Organization standard that has been mentioned so much. Just to say, the World Health Organization has conducted training in the Ministry of Health, and 2 days ago have certified us ready to test water to that standard. That I know you did not know, but I asked that that be done as a second layer of protection, because what was asked here is a critical question, and what was mentioned by Mr. Mike is also a critical point. But I wanted to say here that that is a second layer. And so the World Health Organization now will be overlooking the quality of water in St. Kitts and Nevis, with people in the Ministry of Health trained to test that water and get the results back to World Health Organization through PAHO.
Sorry, just to add a bit. I don't really mean to speak after you, Prime Minister, but as the head of the Water Services Department, it is incumbent upon me to add my bit. The question, I did not interpret it to be meant specifically with regards to the Bastia Desal plant and the water from the Bastia Desal plant, but before the Bastia Desal plant comes online, the Water Services Department has been producing approximately 5 million gallons of water per day to the population. 5 million gallons of water per day for decades and decades. And to answer the question, do we have a quality management system? Yes, we do have a quality management system. The Water Department has 4 sections: production, distribution, maintenance, well, of course, administration, but one of the divisions of the Water Services Department has always been quality division. Okay, that was headed by Mr. Dennis Paul for many years, who recently retired, and we've had other persons. So one of the divisions in the Water Service Department is quality. And so we make sure in that division that they understand, and I always stress how important it is that water is not just about quantity, but it is always about quality. And perhaps even more importantly, I always stress to my colleagues, quality, because water is a food. It is something that is ingested. And I always say, I myself, I drink my water from the tap. I went to a doctor's office today. They asked me to drink a lot of water. I drank the water from the tap right there in Buckley's area. I don't make joke, water department, we don't make joke when it comes around water quality. We take it serious. It is a food. It must be safe for you to ingest the water from the Water Services Department. Yes, we do have a quality system, and it is something that we practice every day. It is not perfect, and yes, we need to look at how we need to constantly improve as we do with everything else in life. But be assured that at the Water Services Department, we don't mess around with water quality, making sure that the relevant tests are done. The department, the Prime Minister mentioned it, the Department of Environmental Health in the Ministry of Health is responsible by law to conduct routine surveillance and testing of water quality throughout St. Kitts. They go around every month, they take samples from different points around the island, they test that water sample, they share the results with us. Sometimes, of course, when we have heavy rains, it is no secret that there are some areas of the island where the surface water will become a bit laden with silt, and of course, that presents a bit of a challenge. But most of our water right now is from wells. We don't have that issue. Whether it rains or not, the water from the well is constant. Water is tested both for microbials, meaning bacteria, etc., as well as for the various chemical constituents. So, yes, we are very serious about water quality, and we will always be, and there will be no difference when this desalination plant comes online. One of the things is that part of the handing over of this plant and the commission of the plant will be all of the necessary procedures and manuals and so on that will be necessary for the safe operation of the plant, including matters related to quality testing and so on. And so we, of course, will make sure that we follow these manuals, etc. Thank you.
Just 1 minute, please. I am trying to be as balanced as possible. We asked members who were listening online. They've submitted a few questions. So if you permit me a few moments to run through a list of questions that we have from our online listeners. The first question reads, what plans are in place to ensure that rural communities benefit equally from the increase in supply? A related question was, will there be enough water for agriculture? So that's the first of 3 questions that I will put to the head table. The second question concerns cost. It reads, what measures are in place to manage costs and ensure sustainability over time? And the third question is one of collective ownership. How can the public play a role in supporting and protecting this investment? 3 very important questions, which I put to the head table.
Thank you very much for those questions and for those listening. I will take a shot at some of these questions and ask my colleagues to come in and give some support as well. With respect to rural communities, I would have mentioned at the beginning that earlier this year, we conducted what is known as a semi-airborne drone hydrogeological survey of all of the rural areas of St. Kitts from Challengers westward around to Lodge, is it? To Molyneux. And from that, we were able to find 17 promising sites of groundwater sources. The Water Services Department has identified 10 of those sites as priority. If I may, because persons are listening, perhaps I should bring up the list if I don't get it up right away. I'm going to ask, I'll come back to it. I don't know if you have it to hand. I'll bring it up here, the list. But we were able to identify 10 priority sites. From those 10 priority sites, we have identified Sadlers as the first site that we will drill. So very shortly, the Sadlers, not Sandy Point. Sadlers followed by Sandy Point, actually. So Sandy Point, I think, is listed number 2 in the priority order. So Sadlers and the drillers are presently shipping in the process of shipping their drilling rig to St. Kitts and Nevis to undertake that particular project. We hope that we could knock off anywhere from 4 to 6 wells in the coming year. We have been, okay, so I have the list here. This is, okay, they're not in order here. Okay. So these are the areas. So Black Rocks, Newton Ground, Parsons Ground, Tabernacle. Tabernacle has 2 sites. Sadlers has 2 sites. Sandy Point, St. Paul's, Brimstone Hill, so I presume that's New Guinea, has 2 sites. Old Road, Molyneux has 2 sites. Stonefort, Challengers, and Keon. So those are the 17 sites that were identified, and 10 were prioritized. I don't have the priority list here, but of those prioritized, Sadlers will be the first one, Sandy Point will be second. So for the question about rural, you have not been left out at all. Bastia doesn't have much more scope to expand into more groundwater because of the challenges with the aquifer that exists now, but the rest of the country does, and so we are pursuing that. So in a couple months, we expect to get more water online, from Sandy Point heading westward all the way around to Lodge, Keon area. The other question was, and I perhaps maybe take the opportunity to explain this to some rural communities in Newton Ground and St. Paul's. I get persons all the time complaining that it is raining in the hills all the time, why I can't get water, it doesn't make any sense. 2 things I will say to that. Number 1, even though it's raining in the hills all the time, unlike a place like Dominica, where I see a Dominican in the audience here today, unlike in Dominica, when it rains in the hills, we actually see water gushing and rushing to the sea. Can you name a place in St. Kitts when it's not raining that you see a river running to the sea? That river that we see in other places is excess water that is heading off to the sea. And in many cases, you can scalp that water or take that water, store it, clean it, and distribute it. We don't have that luxury here because we simply don't have that type of runoff. The science tells us that about 80% of the water from rainfall evaporates or is consumed by transpiration and the trees, etc. Another 2% runs off to the sea, but 18% of it goes into the ground. So a large percentage of the rain that you are seeing in the hills, in Newton Ground, in St. Paul's, in Dateby and Parsons is actually going underground because of the makeup of our soil. Our soil is permeable. It goes to the volcanic rock, it gets filtered, and it settles in aquifers under our feet. We have identified some of those aquifers. And so, yes, those areas see a lot of rain, and we are now going to tap into where those storage tanks are. Later on, I'll speak about why we don't build more storage. I'll give an answer for that. enough for agriculture. One of the things that the identification of these well sites does is gives us the opportunity to also supply for agriculture. At present, we do not have enough to extend supply extensively to our agricultural partners because we don't even have enough for our consumption. And so this attempt at identifying sources, mainly because, and I would say this, when we identify sources on the ground, there is no guarantee of the quality of the water. So unlike we can guarantee the water quality from a desal plant, we actually cannot guarantee the water quality that we will find on the ground. There are some wells in St. Kitts. The gentleman shook his head when I said that desal water will get you better quality than spring water, etc. There are some wells in St. Kitts which we simply cannot use because obviously it interacts with our soil that have different types of minerals and so on. Some of them are poisonous, some of them are not. Depending on the levels that are in the water, we simply can't use the water. So there are wells that we have to close down, not use, limit use because of the makeup of the water. So these 17 sites that we find, we still have to test that water to see whether or not it will be potable and whether we need to treat it further. So it's quite possible that some of these sites may not be ideal. And so it opens up the opportunities for things like agriculture, which does not require that it is potable for drinking, but for agricultural purposes. So this is all part of the effort to identify any source of wells that we might find to help in our agricultural sector as well. Measures to manage costs, I'll probably allow Mr. Williams to deal with that, or Zelaya in terms of managing the operation of the plant. But one question was, how can the public support this infrastructure? The number one thing that the public can do to support is pay your water bill. Water prices in St. Kitts has not been adjusted for almost 25 years. It is probably, if not the lowest tariff in this part of the region. Yet persons are not necessarily fulfilling the payments. We say two things. One, please make every effort to pay your bill to ensure, of course, that you stay connected. And where you have challenges of paying your bill, please visit the Water Services Department to arrange for deferred payment options given your particular situation. So the number one way to help is, one, to keep our bills current. The number two way is conservation. We waste a lot of water in St. Kitts because we have lived with the perception for a very long time that we have excess water. We have to do more in terms of conserving. I am advised by the Water Services Department that the main source of loss of water comes from the toilets in our homes. We are gulping down hundreds of thousands of gallons just from leaking toilets alone. So conservation would be another way that you can support. I want to, at this moment, acknowledge the presence of the Right Honorable Dr. Denzel Douglas, who himself had a fireside chat today or this evening, earlier this afternoon at the Marriott, and is just getting an opportunity to join us. And he would be happy to know that the well that we're drilling next is in the Sadlers community as the representative for the area. I'll turn over to Mr. Williams if you want to deal with managing the cost of operation, or Mr. Francis.
Yes, thank you, Minister. I did mention briefly in my opening remarks that cost is significant. How much? It's the question of how much, because we have to be realistic in everything that we do. Water, persons are quick to say it's a right, it's a natural right. And I agree, it is a right. Everyone has a right to adequate supply of safe, potable water because for health and hygiene purposes. However, many of us abuse that right and take it too far. And we think that the right to access to water means that I have the right to an unlimited quantity at free costs. That is not the interpretation. That is not correct. Okay, so we all have to be prepared as responsible citizens to play our part to support financially water services, just as we do with the other taxes. We want to drive on good roads. We have to pay to license our cars. We want to enjoy all of the other social services that we should have, yes, in a modern country. So just to say that this is going to be a game changer. Our traditional sources of water from the surface intakes in the forest, those are still what they were largely many years ago. There might have been some diminishing, but by and large, they're still there. We cannot get much more. Yes, if you go there now, when we are getting heavy rains, you will see some water being lost, but that is not that significant. Maybe if we're losing 10% now. But if you go back a few months from now, in March, April, May, when the dry season is on, you're going to see a completely different story. You're going to see half of what you're seeing now. You're going to see zero loss. So let's clear that away from the table. When people keep saying, build more catchments or build bigger catchments, that means nothing. The catchment is under your feet. Billions of gallons of water is in the ground, and drilling the wells to get it out, that is the sustainable solution. And where that is not possible, such as in the Bastia area, we then move to the other option, which is desalination. The reason we leave desalination for last option is economical. It costs a lot of money. It costs about at least three times what it costs for me to get water, for the water department to win water from the wells and from the mountain sources. It costs us, let's say, about $10, $15 per 1,000 gallons. Desalination is going to be 2 to 3 times that. We have been purchasing water from Royal Utilities, which we will come to an end pretty soon, but that we saw it real. We had to pay them in excess of $30 per 1,000 gallons. Now, bear in mind, the government is still charging businesses $15 per 1,000 gallons, which is half of that. And for domestic customers, household customers, between $7 and $12, say an average of $10. So we're charging 10 for domestic, 15 for commercial, but we're buying desalinated water from Royal Utilities for 30. And that is what it's going to cost us to produce water from this Bastia desalination plant, perhaps in that vicinity of $30 per 1,000 gallons. How much should the government increase the water rate by? That I will leave to the policymakers in due course. But let's be realistic. We're talking about sustainability in everything that we do. We have to collect revenue in order for us to provide the materials that are necessary in order for us to make sure that this plant continue to operate, so that we continue to maintain it, so that it doesn't have a shortened useful life. So yes, we cannot ignore or we cannot leave out the financial part of this whole process of providing water by desalination.
If I may add something, because this is a question that is always asked, and Mr. Williams alluded to it. I just wanted to reinforce the point. Well, two things I want to speak about. One of the challenges with our surface water at present is the decreased levels. Now, we have to remember that our environment has built itself to sustain itself. So our rainforest, for instance, is expecting that it will have a certain amount of water for it to do what it needs to do. If we, for instance, decide that we want to spend the hundreds of millions of dollars to go further up where the sources are for this surface water and stop that water, it means that we are depriving the water for further down that the forest and all of the different environmental, all of the shrubs and so on depend on. So it is more ideal for us to scalp water that is excess and run into the sea than stopping and taking up all the water that is running off in our hillsides, because it actually has an environmental impact on lower down. So we have to be very, very careful about that. In fact, the better way is when that water runs off from the surface and it permeates the ground, after it has gone through that process of filtration and now it's sitting on top of our seabed, we can then extract that water from the aquifer in a safe way. And we can't compare to that storage. And let me give you an example of that storage. So we compare runoff water to what we have in aquifers. We need about 7 million gallons of water per day in St. Kitts. 7 million gallons. We are producing maybe about 5 or so right now. Let us say, or let me go further, it will cost maybe about $7 or $8 million to build 1 million gallons of storage. We presently have about 7.5 or somewhere around there, 8 million gallons of storage of water in St. Kitts. So let us say that we were able to raise the funds to build, let's say, 21 million gallons of storage today in a heartbeat. So somebody work out 21 million times 7. That's probably close to $150 million. If we were able to find $150 million right now and build storage immediately right now, 21 million gallons worth of storage, and we were also able to direct all of the runoff water that comes from a gut, for instance, that is running during heavy rains to this storage, we would store 21 million gallons of water after a heavy downpour of rain. But with St. Kitts needing 7 million gallons per day, how much days or how many days of water do we have from the 21 million gallons of storage? 3 days. So we would spend $150 million to capture water from rainfall that happens sporadically to catch 21 million gallons, to only have water for 3 days. Because what happens in February, March, April, May, when we don't have that downpour of rain, when we don't have a gut that is running that we can direct to this 21 million gallons of storage we have, then we have empty storage and it means nothing. Compare that in the first instance to spending $50 million on a desal plant that gives you 2 million gallons of water per day, rain, sun, or shine. Additionally, let's look at our Bastia Valley Aquifer that produces for us close to 2.5 million gallons of fresh water every day. There could be 6 months where we have no rain. The Bastia Valley Aquifer will still produce 2.5 million gallons of water. All of that water was captured in the hillside. Those same runoffs that you're seeing that we're tapping into for our surface water, all of that is going into the ground and settling in our aquifers. So if we round it off to 2 million gallons a day that the Bastia Valley Aquifer is providing, after 10 days, that's 20 million. A month, that's 60 million. 6 months, 360 million gallons of water we could get from our Bastia Valley aquifer without a drop of rain coming. So our aquifers are actually part of our renewable source, or our source of water that is replenished over time because of the cycle of water. But for us to capture runoff water that is only present when we have a heavy downpour of rain, that is certainly not sustainable. So that went into the decision as to why you would go with desalination in certain areas and why you will go with groundwater in certain areas, because we do not have sufficient surface water for that to be a source. In fact, the UN has categorized St. Kitts and Nevis as a water scarce country. So we make the list of the countries that do not have enough water to provide for its people. As I said, there's a Dominican in the crowd here. I visited some time ago, and I drove from the airport to Rosa, that's the town, and I passed no less than 25 rivers. And all I could think about as the Minister of Water from St. Kitts is why on earth I couldn't have those rivers that run in every day, 365 days a year, that I could take some of that water, then I could build 21 million gallons worth of storage, or even 49 million gallons of storage, because I have a consistent source. So our issue has never been, and is presently not, about storage. Our issue is about source. We need to invest in providing a reliable, constant source of water. If we were to build, it's the same thing. If the government is giving you 100 gallons of water per day, and that's all they're giving you, if you go and buy a 1,000-gallon tank, buying a 10,000-gallon tank is not going to change that we're only getting 100 gallons per day. And so our issue is finding reliable, consistent, sustainable source. Once we have the source, then what we build storage for is contingency, so that when the source has to stop for maintenance, etc., we have a day or two. I think industry standard is 3 days. So you will not find any developed area that has storage or is building storage for much beyond 3 days, because your idea is to have a reliable source of water. So I just wanted to add that to the discussion.
All right, thank you very much, Minister. I also wish to acknowledge the presence of Senior Minister, the Right Honorable Dr. Denzil Douglas. We have been discussing this topic for quite a while. Obviously, there is more to discuss. I do believe that the public wants to continue to weigh in, so allow me to invite all of you who might not have had the opportunity to do so now to continue to use the WhatsApp number that I gave you at 664-3085 to submit further questions. At this particular point in time, I would like to ask the head table if there are any final thoughts that they would love to share. Any last words of admonition or encouragement to the public or positivity? Oh, you do have questions. Forgive me. Okay. So we will table that for now and allow Mr. Schneidman to head to the microphone.
Good evening. I'm Schneidman Warner. We were told that the cost of production of this plant is $50 million. Can you tell us how was this $50 million funded in terms of whether loans or grants and local sources? 2, what is the annual expected operational cost of this plant? 3, the minister pointed out, and well, he didn't say this, but I'm saying this. The only thing cheaper in St. Kitts than water is the cost of a burial plot at the Springfield Cemetery. The only thing that has stayed unchanged in price longer than the price of water is the cost of a burial plot at the Springfield Cemetery. But one of them is far more valuable for day-to-day living. A previous minister of public utilities promised that never under his administration would the price of water be increased to consumers. Is such an attitude sustainable, especially if we are told the cost of producing 1,000 gallons of water will be $30, whereas we are now paying $7.50 for 1,000 gallons for residential consumers? And on the subject of management, isn't price a factor? If we were forced to pay more for water, wouldn't we be more reasonable? Those of us who go to the supermarket and buy a bottle of water don't just toss it out and say it was old, but somehow we waste water without any conscience. And finally, how many persons will be employed at the plant, what will be the workforce of the desalination plant at its maximum operations? Oh, one final question. You said that the capacity is 2 million gallons. Will that be the amount generated each day? So you'll be running at full capacity each day. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for those questions. I will address how the plant was funded. I will allow Mr. Williams to come in on the operational cost, which, by the way, a part of the commissioning and so on. We will fine tune that, because for instance, we're using 33% less electricity than we anticipated. So that will then decrease the production costs as well. The cost of water I will deal with a bit, and I will also turn over to Mr. Williams in terms of the employment levels. So with respect to the funding, we have partnered with the Republic of China on Taiwan for funding for this. So it's part government funded, and part funded by the Republic of China on Taiwan through the ICDF in the form of a loan, which of course have very good terms. I don't know the specifics of the terms, but the partnership has always yielded much benefit. And so that is how it was funded, and the funding covers not only the plant, but also the power generation of the plant. So if for any reason, Skelec is unable to provide power for the plant can operate, I think, at 60% or thereabout with the backup generation that it has. In terms of operational costs, as I said, we'll get into that. Those figures, I presume, are still being fine-tuned in terms of what the actual cost of operation will be based on consumables estimates. Electricity is going to be the largest cost associated with this. So that will depend on how much electricity is used and how much the rate of electricity is, of course, at the time. Cost of water, very important question. I want to draw for an analogy that you mentioned persons going to the supermarket and buying water. We can safely say that about a gallon of water people will buy for $5 in the supermarket. As Mr. Williams said, I drink water straight from the pipe. I am very proud of the Water Services Department. I might have been, I don't know if influenced, but my father, for instance, who worked at the brewery for 30 odd years, was adamant. He's responsible for making sure that the water that comes into the brewery is of high standard to make the bottled drinks. And he was adamant that he's not buying any processed water. He drinks the water straight from the pipe because he says, look, we test the water every day at the Carib Brewery, and the standard is sufficient for us to just do our usual, whatever they need to do to the water to produce it. So I drink my water from the tap. But others say no, they would like to purchase their water in bottles for everything except perhaps bathing and flushing the toilet. But for drinking and for cooking, etc., they buy water. No issue with that. But they're paying roughly $5 per gallon. Our rate, our lowest rate at the Water Services Department is about $7.50 per 1,000 gallons. So what you are paying $5,000 for, the government is charging you $7.50. Because if you are to multiply a 1 gallon by 1,000, or rather multiply $5 by 1,000 gallons, our consumers are paying $5,000 for the same water that you can get from the government for $7.50. Kudos to the water companies who have figured this out to be able to have their business. That's good. We're not hitting them. But we just want to show the disparity in the cost that you're willing to pay for drinking water at the supermarket compared to what is being charged presently. And so we obviously over time will evaluate what is the appropriate rate of water that makes our production sustainable. When I came as the minister, we instituted the Water Board, who is responsible for advising the government on what the rates are. I believe that they have made some preliminary assessments, and very shortly in the new year, we'll be calling upon them to make their renewed assessments, given the input of desalinated water and the other wells that are going to come on stream. So that's a very important question about cost. I will now turn over to Mr. Williams to deal with the operational cost and also how many people will be employed over time.
Yes, in terms of operational costs of the desalination plant, we cannot say precisely at this time. Of course, when the plant was proposed, the whole proposal for the construction of the plant, part of that proposal included an estimate of what a typical operational cost would be. But of course, you would only know the exact figures once the plant starts operating. Typically, about half of the cost of operating a desalination plant is electricity, the electrical usage. The other half goes into what we call consumables and replacement of spare parts, because it's a complex plant with hundreds, maybe even thousands of different parts and components. Something will go wrong from time to time. I think it's also important to note that just like with a car, you would not expect your operational costs to be that high in the initial phase because everything is new. But as time go by, of course, the operational costs you expect would increase. And so we, based on what the figures we were given, I think it worked out to roughly about $5 million per year for the for the consumables and spares, etc. And I think the electricity costs will be about in that range as well. So strictly speaking, you're talking about $10 million EC per year to operate this plant. But that figure might not be realized in the first initial years because everything is new. In terms of the capacity of the plant can produce a maximum of 2 million gallons per day. That's a lot of water. Bastia and its environs currently use about 3.5. So we are increasing the capacity in this Bastia system by more than 50%. We're going from 3.5 to a maximum capacity of 5.5. However, the plant is subdivided into modular units. There are 5 units. That 2 million is broken up into 5 units that are independent, that can run independently. We refer to them as trains. So trains A, B, C, D, E, each one has a capacity of 400,000 gallons per day. So we can run one plant, we can run the plant at 400,000 gallons per day. We can run it at 8, 12, 16, 20. So we can run any amount, any number of trains that we want, depending on the demand. Now, I suspect that the plant was designed with a bit of future capacity. So I really don't expect that immediately we will be using the 2 million gallons every day. I am one who is big on conservation. From the moment I entered this profession, I saw that the day was going to come if we didn't change our culture in St. Kitts. And I started preaching water conservation, water conservation. It is no coincidence that the Right Honorable Dr. Denzel Douglas is here, because when I started in the water sector in around 2000, well, I started in 1999. About a year and a half in, my predecessor retired, and I took over the helm, and I started doing some public awareness. And I still have a little note at home which I prize. It was from the Right Honorable Dr. Denzel Douglas. He took the time out of his busy schedule as the Prime Minister to write me a note to commend me for raising public awareness on water conservation. And it is not for lack of the water department trying to sensitize the public in St. Kitts that we are using much more water than we ought to. We are doing a project now to send off to an international agency. And when the consultants do the assessment of our water usage, they were shocked. They were saying, well, you know, you all are using a lot more water than when we compare to the other islands. Now, water usage is a reflection of standard of living. So if every household in St. Kitts has a washing machine, if you go to St. Lucia or St. Vincent and maybe 50 or 75% of the houses having a washing machine, you will see a difference in usage. If a typical house in St. Kitts having 4 toilets and in other islands it's 1 or 2, you will see a difference in water usage, not respective of the number of the population. So a smaller population in St. Kitts Nevis could be using more water than a larger population in another country. So it's a reflection of our standard of living, but it's also a reflection of that we are not willing to listen to the water department as we preach, and as we've been preaching for years and years and years, that we are too lax, we are too wasteful in how we use water. Now, some people push back at us and they say, but you all talking about conservation, but what happens when a pipe breaks there and we call you all to fix it? You all take a week, you all take a month. Yes, there will be some exceptions. We try our best to respond as timely as we can, given our resources. Sometimes we're fighting for vehicle, we're fighting for different things and so on. We have to compete with all the other ministries. The government has limited funds. But we all must work together to take water conservation very seriously in St. Kitts. We must wake up to the reality that is not just looking out your window and saying, it's raining, why don't I have water? It's not that simple. It's not that simple. Oh, it rains, so where's the water in my tap? The water has to be managed amongst 40,000 people and among the industries, amongst agriculture. The brewery, for instance, is our single largest user in St. Kitts. That was not so 10 years ago, 20 years ago when I came into this water sector. I'm sure the brewery was not nowhere near the largest user. They have grown their industry, and we're happy because that means more jobs, I'm sure. So we want to encourage whichever sector wants to expand and use water, more water. That is good for the economy of the country. But we individually can play our part by monitoring how you use water. Every single household, every single individual, whether you're in 5 years in preschool or kindergarten, or you are an elderly, or you are 30, 40, 50, doesn't matter. The time has come and has long passed when in St. Kitts we need to change our culture of how we see water. It is past midnight. The last thing I'm going to say is the price. Because we have been talking and we can continue to talk, but the only thing that will change behavior is when the government do the right thing.
Are there any other questions?
What I want to say is water is life. The most serious problem, sink it in, I'm not sure about Nevis, I know sink is where I live on, that we face is right now is water. Whether we want to sweep it under the carpet, hide it, talk niceties about it, the greatest problem we have is water. And desalination is not the panacea. It is certainly not, but it do have some side effect. We're not talking about the chemical have to be induced in it to replace the natural ingredient in the water, etc. And the negative effect you have also on agriculture because of some of the salt still staying in it. Desalination only take away some of the salt, not 100%. Take away some of the salt. This is why you have to substitute the various chemicals to make it potable or taste like water again. Mr. Minister, what I would suggest, we need to call what you call a national water crisis. You mentioned that there was Joan that saw 17 hydrogeological wells. Even if you need to ask for assistance to come and get those wells up and running. It's an emergency we face it. The water that's been running, and I see this daily, from Old Road into the water, that water can catch further up. And if you don't want to use it for drinking water, it may be polluted by household stuff, you can give the animal, you can give agriculture. We need to do something urgently. And thirdly, and it's the last one, all those purifying water places, you need to put a pause on them. 50% of the water is being lost when the water is being purified, osmosis, reverse osmosis. You need to put a stop on it until our water condition improve. I say no more.
Thank you very much for the input. In terms of dealing with the urgency of now, this administration has been urgent in the need. Upon taking office in 2022, we obviously did an analysis of the landscape, and we proceeded at the lowest fruit that we could identify, which was drilling and commissioning a well in the Keon area. Keon had struggled with water security for a very long time, and we were able to commission over a year and a half ago now a 300,000 gallon per day well. Correct? 420,000, I'm corrected. 420,000 gallon per day well in Keon, which means that Keon is now one of those communities that have more water than they actually need, which is a good thing. And as I was saying earlier, now that we have identified the source, the next step after that is to spend the money developing the storage. So we're now building a 500,000 gallon per day, 500,000 gallon tank in Keon at a higher elevation, so that when we store the water, we can actually distribute it to everyone. The tank in Keon right now is at a lower level, so there are people in Keon who live above the tank who obviously will not be able to source from that tank. So we're now building a tank that is higher than that to be able to store the water that we're getting. So we acted urgently. Similarly, with the desal plant, we acted urgently to engage stakeholders, went out and received quotations on the solutions that were available, did the assessment, and Royal Utilities won that opportunity. And ever since then, they have been working to design the plant, all the engineering, etc. These things do take time. I wish that it could happen overnight, but I know, I'm an engineer as well, that these things take a lot of time. But we have accomplished a lot in just 3 years so far, being where we are to launch a 2 million gallon desalination plant, to be having a 300,000 gallon well in Keyon and about to drill many more wells in St. Kitts. So it is urgent, and we're taking it as that. We didn't wait, for instance, and this is something that the Water Services Department would tell you. While we were doing the hydrogeological survey, I said, we're not going to wait until we find the sites. We're going to go to procurement now. We're not going to wait until we find a site and decide that that is where we want to drill to go and advertise for drillers. No. Let us find a way to advertise for drillers now so that when we get back the results from the survey, we don't have to wait long to engage the drillers. And so said, so done. About the same week that we got the results, around the same time we got the results from the survey, we secured the contract for the drilling because we had already gone through that procurement process. So we have been acting in an urgent way to deal with this situation. So yes, we have the driller. That one is from Trinidad and Tobago. They have extensive experience in drilling. And so we are happy that they have come on board. They won the procurement process. And so we are acting urgently. Over the past 3 years alone, the government has increased the water budget by over 400%. We have a zeroed-in focus on water as a national situation, which we are trying to deal with, and we're dealing with as much gusto as we possibly can. Obviously, we're going to meet challenges. We also do have an aging system. Where along the way, we are going to have to replace a number of aging pipes. We have a situation, for instance, on the Southeast Peninsula, where that system can't take any pressure at all. So we have constant burst pipes. We will always have a limited amount of resources, and so we have to be able to stretch them. The Water Services Department just successfully laid over 5,000 feet of new pipeline, HDPE pipes. This is the first time that we have laid that much of this type of pipe. 16-inch pipe from the Desal plant at Paul Southwell Industrial Site up to Mon Peak. Successfully laid, is now invisible to the naked eye, but we've already done that, and it is these wonderful group of persons that are doing that. And so perhaps at this point, I would like to give commendation for the extraordinary work that our men and women in the Water Services Department, from the manager to the engineers to the foremen to the clerks, to the all of the different people who go to the wells, to the person that cleans the office to make sure that it is a good environment. I want to say a heartfelt thank you. This has been a collective effort. I want to thank the cabinet, because obviously I have gone to the cabinet seeking significant amount of investment to get this done. And undoubtedly, every time so far, the cabinet has supported the requests that have come from my ministry when it comes to water. I remember the days, I'm not going to call any names, when civil servants would tell me, you ain't going to get that, because that's just how it is. The government don't spend that much money all one time. I said, no, we're going to try. We have a new dispensation in. We have an agenda to fulfill, a mandate that was given, and I am committed, as the guy who sang It Must Be in the Water, to ensure that we have water across St. Kitts 24 hours a day. And so we're well on our way. We're within touching distance. Possibly within another couple of months, we could be bringing almost 100% of the island back to 100% water. So the situation is urgent. We're taking it as that, and we welcome the engagement from the general public on our endeavor.
So, good evening to all. My name is Stuart Busai, and I would like to commend the work that you guys are doing. Now, by far, I am totally in agreement that groundwater is extremely important, and desalination is not replacing groundwater, but it must complement it. Now, I remember back in 2009, I went to Mexico to do some studies because there was some E. coli presented in the water in Cancun. And that was a serious issue They couldn't find it, and then eventually they found that it was the groundwater that was contaminated. And right now in Mexico City, as you know, people thought that they would have never run out of water, and now they're totally out of water. So the only option they're looking towards is desalination. And here now in St. Kitts, I am glad that you guys introduced desalination now to complement that we have with the water department, because we do not want to reach a point where we only depend on desalination because we're out of water. So that act that you guys are doing is magnificent. I think they work hand in hand. And yes, when I finish playing basketball afternoon or exercising in the gym, I really don't want to go home without water. So, Sandy Point, I wish it be the next option up. Instead of, we could always move forward and move Settlers. Right, Honorable? Second, and Sandy Point come after. But no, on an honest note, you guys are doing an excellent job, and I compliment you guys. All right?
Thank you very much. We value the endorsement, and we will continue to do what we need to do to bring the entirety of St. Kitts to 24-hour water. I want to say, and this is a challenge that I've given the Water Services Department, because we are bringing the 2 million gallon water desal plant online in a matter of days or weeks, depending on, we are presently in the commissioning stage where we're testing and stress testing the plant. But we are also doing something where we are interconnecting existing wells so that they can feed areas that they traditionally did not feed. So we have wells in the Bastia Valley Aquifer that would have been supplying areas such as Mon Peak. We are interconnecting to other areas of our distribution so that when we are able to provide more water in the Mon Peak from the desal, we can divert that water to other areas that are stressed as well. What this means is that we are going to push back where the water comes from. So if we have 2 million gallons added to Bastia, if it means we can use less of the groundwater because we are using too much right now, we need to bring it back down so that we don't see any saltwater intrusion. And perhaps let me just pause on that of the point I was going to make, just to address a concern I also heard from the gentleman who spoke earlier about the amount of salt in the water. The reality is we will probably find more salt content in some of our groundwater sources than you would find in the desal water, because the desal process actually removes those salts. Right now, we are seeing what is called increased levels of saltwater intrusion, and that's why we cannot pull on the well too much. I'll take this opportunity just for those who are listening. I can give a best explanation as I can. Our fresh water in our aquifers sit on top of salt water. So if we pull the fresh water too quickly, we run the risk of contaminating the fresh water. So we have to pull it at a specific rate. We should not overextend it. And so every well has something called a safe yield. How much you can safely pull, so one, that it is replenished, and then how fast you can pull it in terms of, there's a big word. When we were doing the K-on well, I did some research and I learned how it worked and so on. Very fascinating. We can only pull it at a particular rate to prevent the intrusion of salt water. So we are seeing that taking place. One, I think it's because of the rising sea levels. So the level under St. Kitts and Nevis is actually rising at the same rate that the sea water is rising. And then the reduced amount of fresh water that is being filtered in our ground to go over that aquifer. But coming back to what I was saying, because of the injection of the water in the Bastia Valley Aquifer from the desal plant, it means then that the water that we usually use from Wingfield that reaches into Bastia and goes to our Lagwit facility, so Wingfield, Franklands, and Stonefort, etc., some of that water reaches into Bastia. We can now not have all of that water reaching into Bastia, and we can actually divert it in the other direction, which is towards the Sandy Point area. So depending on how our interconnections go in the Bastia area, I've given the Water Services Department a challenge that while we are drilling the wells and before we can reach to Sandy Point, how much of the water we can divert so that we can bring Sandy Point back online for 24 hours, even before we drill the well there. So that's a challenge that we are attempting to see if it's possible. So that's some good news for you.
if we are successful, then we'll be able to aid in bringing, if not completely 24 hours, more water to the Sandy Point area. Thank you very much for your comment again.
There was a portion of a question that I believe might have been unanswered when Mr. Warner asked about the number of employees.
The question that relates to that would be, as you mentioned, the number of employees that would be working there at the desalination plant. We would have looked at the number of possible workers that we needed at the plant, and we came up with a rough figure. This figure would not stay the same over time, but to start off with, it is a decent number. So the number would be 8 persons so far. When it comes to shift hours, a minimum of 2 persons would be on shift to make sure everything is running appropriately. One person would probably be doing the quality checks. The other persons may be checking pumps and so forth. As well, myself will be there during the day to make sure everything is going smoothly. 8 persons to start. However, moving forward, there will be the need for more persons because we want to have the plant running as efficiently as possible. And if we only stick with the 8, we may run into some issues down the road. For example, if we're doing stock keeping, we need persons in that area. If we're doing consumables replacement, we need persons in that area. If we're doing as the sir from Bureau Standards what I mentioned, the quality checks every day, we need someone in that area to do those checks. And so initially 8 persons is okay, but over time we definitely want to increase that number. Thank you.
Just saying 8 persons, like for instance, to start off with, I think he wanted to know when you're running at full capacity, what number you're looking at. I think that is a more appropriate direction that we're looking at. Like we're saying, maybe 50 persons in total that will be running the plant when it is 100% efficient and in production.
No, whether we're running at 100% or 60%. No. So that 8 persons only include assistant operators. I should have mentioned that. Assistant operations, and then you're going to have me above them. And then that does not include the manager and so on, right? So we're just talking about assistant operators. Whether we're running 100% or at 60%, that is half the trains that are there. This is the initial number we are going to start off with.
I just want to add as well, of course, as we use the next 12 months to do the assessment, I mentioned earlier that we are going to have an operations and maintenance management, a separate contract that we engage the manufacturers to run. This is going to be part of our learning to understand what is the optimal level of running the plant. So they're bringing their experts, but the field and the assistant operators and so on will be local. So we will gauge from that experience what is the optimum level of managing the plant. Of course, over that 12 months, we will also determine exactly what the structure will be. Will the plant then have its own operation mandate that is maybe separate from water services department? Is it that the plant is going to run and water services is going to purchase water from the plant, etc.? We're going to look at what the ideal situation is as we evaluate not just operating that plant, but water services in general. Whether it's presently a department of government, we are looking at the benefits and the drawbacks of corporatization of the water services department, so that we can find the optimal level of staffing for the plant and for water services. So that's going to be an ongoing exercise. We have identified in the first instance that this is what we need. We are going to bring the experts to, as I said, be part of that initial phase. And the next 12 months are going to be critical for us to identify what exactly we need.
Thank you, Minister. And I do want to say, as we bring this session to a close, it is obvious that water is very important to all of us. So I want to thank, first and foremost, you, Minister, for taking the lead on this very important initiative. And of course, to Mr. Williams, to Mr. Zelaya, to Mr. Moyes, to the Permanent Secretary, and all of the staff, and of course, our affiliates who have helped us get to this point. I also want to acknowledge, of course, the contributions of not only the people here today who have asked questions, but also those online who clearly have signified that this discussion on water, this national discussion on water, is very important. So as we end this phase of the discussion, I will allow the Minister to wrap up.
Thank you very much, Mr. Morris. I want to thank everyone for being here this evening, and for those listening on social media and on radio for being part of this discussion on water. I want to take this opportunity to thank a number of persons, and I hope I don't leave out too many. Obviously, we want to thank the developer, Royal Utilities, for their extraordinary work in design and building this plant. But it doesn't stop at the developer. We have a number of persons involved. I want to thank TransGlobal, who are the project managers for this particular project, to ensure that the developer is meeting the requirements of our contract and engagement with them, and for their excellent work that they're doing. I want to thank the Water Services Department, because there is a whole slew of items that needed to be covered. In fact, the contract had stiff penalties if the Water Services Department was not ready with their particular connections to the plant. Fortunately, we were able to get that done, and so we weren't exposed to that. So I want to thank the management of the Water Services Department, led by Mr. Cromwell Williams, and his staff, including Chief Engineer, who is here, Mr. Landry Isaac, who is from Keon, so he has every reason to know that he has gotten water to help others get some water. Mr. Francis Zelaya here, who is our plant supervisor, all the other assistant engineers at the Water Service Department, the foremen, clerk of works, the whole team of the Water Service Department in the admin, all of them are integral to this. Every Tuesday we meet with the team, from customer service to accounts to everyone, to be a part of the process. I want to thank our communications team. Mr. Morris is here as our communications officer, and our service providers who have done an excellent job providing all of the social, all of the media content for us. They are doing an excellent job. I want to also thank you, the general public, for your questions, your inquiries, your suggestions that you have had over the years. I want to thank, of course, the leadership at the ministry, led, of course, by our permanent secretary, Mr. Daryl Lloyd, and the team, Mrs. Shaniqua Carey-Brown, Senior Assistant Secretary, Tiffany Hodge, the Assistant Secretary, and all of the others who are part of the administrative team at the ministry. Without all of their involvement, this would not be possible. I also want to thank, of course, as I mentioned before, the Cabinet of Ministers for their unwavering support in this. This is one issue where they don't say no on water issues. As I said, the budget has been increased by over 400%. We have spent significant amount of millions of dollars investing in our water infrastructure. As mentioned, Dr. Douglas is here, right? Honorable Dr. Douglas. Thanks for your support. The Prime Minister was here earlier as well, showing the Cabinet's commitment to this endeavor to bring water concerns, or to deal with the water concerns that we have and provide water. If I have left out anyone, all the other agencies within government, the Bureau of Standard, for their participation, all of the subcontractors who would have worked, the backhoe, excavator men, etc. We really want to thank everyone for being part of this process. It has really been a national effort, and we still have work to do because this is just the beginning. It's not going to be perfect. When we turn on the switch, We can't guarantee that for 24 hours for the next 50 years, it will never turn off. That's just not how things work. There are going to be down times, there are going to be burst pipes, there are going to be times where we have to maintain, etc. So I'm craving your understanding in this and be a part of our process going forward. I thank the questioners for bringing some very poignant questions to the front of our minds, and we will do everything to ensure that anything that we have left out, we'll do what we can to address it. So thank you very much to everyone. Stay tuned. Very shortly, we will have a commissioning ceremony where we will introduce the desal plant once all the commissioning is passed, once all the tests are passed for the quality of the water, and once the integrity of the whole process is confirmed. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Minister. And with those words, the session is now concluded. Thank you all.